set of regulations in place. Oh, shush, darling. That's a controversial opinion.
She agrees.
What do you think it is, darling? Or are you saying don't say too much, Daddy? You'll get yourself in trouble.
All right, hello and welcome to the Money Lap podcast. I'm your host, Parker Kligerman. As always, I will not be joined by Landon Cassill on this special episode because I have a guest with us here on the Money Lap. None other than the man who's the king of the pause. He's known really well for his time on the hit show Drive to Survive on Netflix. He's also one of the hosts on F1 TV, was a coworker of mine at NBC Sports, and a reporter on Speed Channel for F1. None other than Will Buxton to come on here and debate track limits. It's an amazing debate. We go into a lot of different angles through it. We then top it all off with a global discussion about where Formula One is at, drivers to keep an eye on, and even our own American Logan Sargeant, an assessment on his season so far and his time in Formula One. As always, check out themoneylap.com for the Money Lap newsletter. Comes to your inbox 3 times a week. But this was a really cool interview. And we did have a bit of technical difficulty. He's in England for about the first
6 minutes.
Producer Josh has done his best work possible to sync this all together. We actually switched platforms. So we went from one platform that we normally use to another one, and eventually then also just natively recorded this. So this is taken an immense effort to put it all together, but we hope you enjoy it. It's a great conversation, a lot of debate, a little bit of a disagreement, as you'd imagine, but maybe a consensus as to what the motorsport world globally could do to fix this pressing issue of track limits. With that, before I let you go in the interview, real quick though, we have a huge announcement at the Money Lap. Something that I can't say just yet, but stay tuned to our email, to our social media over the coming week. We're about to announce something massive that we're going to do for about 5 or 6 weeks in the off season, and we need you to be a part of it. Stay tuned for that. Enjoy this interview. It was awesome. Well, that's awesome.
How's it going?
Who do we have the company here with us?
This is Isla. Isla is 4 months old and she is refusing to go to bed. She needs her sleep and she's got really grouchy. And Mummy's gone out, so Daddy is left literally holding the baby. So
this is awesome.
We've just had to change the setup a little bit with the mic positioning and the camera. But hopefully you're gonna go to sleep, aren't you? Hopefully.
I love this. For those that are listening, so we'll just, by the way, we'll probably just jump right into this. I've done an intro and all that stuff.
No worries, mate.
Really appreciate you being on.
Oh, my absolute pleasure.
Here.
Thank you so much for inviting me on. I'm absolutely chuffed to bits.
It's cool to have you on the Money Lap and for all you've done. And we've actually, at one point in our lives, we were coworkers, for those that don't know.
I know.
Although separated by continents, essentially.
Yes, separated by continents and championships. But yeah.
Very cool. So Will Buxton on the Money Lap with Isla. For those listening at home, not watching this video, he is carrying his baby right now in a front pouch as he tries to put him to sleep. Sorry. she's trying. Bless her. She's just. We've got to that little stage of sleep regression where she was sleeping wonderfully. Now she's 4 months old and she started. You don't want to sleep, do you, darling? You don't want to sleep. Anyway. Thanks for having me on, guys. I'm so chuffed to be on the show. Thank you so much. Definitely. So let's dive into you a little bit. For the listeners out there, a little background on Will Buxton. You and I were, as we mentioned, we were coworkers at NBC when you were a Formula One reporter. I was doing the NASCAR stuff.
Yeah.
I was watching you every weekend. I don't know if we ever crossed paths in the same place at the same time, but I was paying attention. We had many mutual coworkers, and then you went on into F1 TV. That's what you're doing now. You've done the Drive to Survive on Netflix as the guy with the king of the pause, I would say.
Yes.
But then recently, this past weekend, the Mexican Grand Prix, you celebrated your 300th Grand Prix attendance. That's pretty amazing, man.
It's wild, man. Yeah, mate. So you and I know each other from the NBC days, but I started as a print journalist 22 years ago. Fell into PR GP2 and Rosberg and Hamilton, those guys, and fell back into journalism. Got asked to do commentary one day. totally randomly. Then Speed Channel heard it, said, "Do you want to be up on Pit Reporter?" And he picked me up from Speed Channel, and then F1 said, "Do you want to come and do FEV?" It's been a crazy roller coaster, 20 odd years, and just a joy, just such a pleasure to be able to talk about motorsport. It's been great.
I love it. You know, one of your current coworkers, James Hinchcliffe, he told me last year, we were texting about him being at the U.S. Grand Prix, and he said, Will Buxton is and I quote, rock star right now. He said leaving the hotel was difficult. Tell me, so you've done 300 Grand Prix, but obviously with the Netflix Drive to Survive popularity, explosions happen around Formula One. What has it been like for you to the start of going to these races, being on Speed Channel to now what you're doing, in terms of him saying it was tough to get to the rental car with the amount of fans you have now?
Yeah. That's last year wild in Austin. Pretty similar this year, although the Ferrari drivers had moved out of our hotel this year, so there was a slightly fewer fans because they were obviously waiting for this.
But we've talked about obviously your history in Formula One, Drive Survive, being a rock star. But the real reason you and I have connected for this podcast is to talk about one singular issue that is becoming a thorn in the side to professional drivers, from Formula One to the lower ranks to karting to NASCAR, you name it. It's a discussion that's happening across the motorsports world as we change these racetracks to have more pavement on the exit of corners. A word and a term has surfaced that has annoyed me, but also been a discussion point, I think, for everyone. And you have a unique point of view. I think you also, one thing I want to point out is that you are one of the few journalists that I believe has a really nuanced understanding of what it's like to drive a race car. For every reason, you understand and can conceptualize and put together and sort of put out there what it's really like to drive a race car. So I've been against track limits. We know this. Everyone listening knows this. You have the other side. I want to know, what is your opinion? What is your point of view on track limits as you see it in Formula One right now in 2023?
Let me praise you this by saying I don't think, this is a conversation that I ever wanted to have, because track limits were never a discussion. When I was a kid and looking back through the history of the sport, tracks were self-policing. And so it was never an issue. If you put two wheels off on the grass or the dirt, chances are it would ruin your lap time. So it wasn't an advisable route to take. And as we all know, racing drivers will take the fastest route around anywhere, no matter what it is. But the more you clip an apex, the more you hit the grass, the more the dirt kicks up and the dirt goes on the track. So you need to replace that with an apex curb. And the same would go because you're going to run a wheel wide on the exit. So then you need to put an apex curb, an exit curb in. Then, obviously, we roll into safety parameters and issues over damage and cost, and gravel traps, which were for decades in circuit racing, your go-to for runoff. Suddenly they became not the go-to because people didn't want their cars damaged if they ran wide. Bikers don't like going through gravel, so you replace them with huge swathes of runoff, of asphalt runoff. Paul Ricard was the first track that I went to that really showed how effective but silly that could be, because there was no runoff there other than asphalt and high abrasion runoff, which would literally drag the rubber off the tires to slow them down, so that it was open not as a racetrack but as a test track. So if you went off, you didn't spend an hour trying to fix the car and drag in all the kitty litter out of the side pods. You literally just came in, slapped on a new set of boots, went back out again. But as each of the newer circuits have come out, there is this propensity towards the asphalt runoff. Now, I'm not sure what the rules state in NASCAR, but in Formula One and in most open wheel championships that I've seen the sporting regulations to, there is a clause in the sporting regulations which says, the track, and the track, for the avoidance of doubt, is the surface between the white lines.
Yep.
So there's a very clear legal definition of what the circuit is.
Yep.
The discussion now, obviously, will roll to where we're going, but to praise this entire argument, for Formula 1, Formula 2, Formula 3, for most of the championships that I cover, the track, the playable surface is very clearly defined as being between the white lines. That's it. Just as there is a minimum weight. There are technical parameters over aerodynamics and engines and fuel, everything else. There is a very clearly defined regulation that states this is the playable surface. If you go outside, just as with weight, doesn't matter if it's 10 kilos, 1 kilo, half a kilo, couple of grams, you're out. You're out.
Yes. Yep. So I think, and that was a great breakdown of the history, and I appreciate that. And I think that is a key part of this, right? That the track designs themselves have really changed over the last 20 years, right? Where we've gone because of MotoGP and the idea of test circuits like Paul Ricard, and even COTA being, more of this modern design racetrack that allows the runoff to be this asphalt so that cars don't get stuck, MotoGP riders don't flop around in the gravel, so on and so forth. I think the problem, though, and I totally get the definition via the FIA of white line to white line, right? I think the problem is you look even just 6 years ago, 7 years ago, or tracks that don't have asphalt runoff, that is not enforced and has not been enforced. So now
because it's self-policing.
It's self-policing, right? You have this idea of self-policing, and I get that. And I think, to me, though, where I've come from, and my not hatred, but my problem.
You can say hatred
of track limits is that from the day I started go-karting, when I started, so a little background, and I think some of this, but the first racing I found was Formula 1 on TV in 1999, Speed Vision at the time, but became Speed Channel. And I was like, wait a second, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. I liked cars. And in that era, and from the day I've watched those races to when I went to go-karting, there was this glorification of drivers who could find a little bit more, right? That's always been the thing. Who's the, Juan Montoya leaving the pit lane at the Indianapolis 500 in 2000, completely sideways, dropping a tire into the grass on the exit. Mika Hakkinen, 2000 Imola pole lap, that's the right sides into the grass off the top chicane. Martin Brundle's
imagine how much faster he would have gone if he wasn't in the grass.
Yeah, well, exactly. No, definitely. I get that. But my point being is
self-policing.
Self-policing. He's still got the pole. So the point being is there's this glorification of finding that every mount there is possible. There's street courses. And now my problem is it's so sterile to me.
So I get where you're coming from. It looks sterile, okay?
Yes.
Imagine it's Monaco. We talk about a self-policing track. Mm-hmm. Monaco is self-policing because you take too much of a bite out of a curb, you run too wide on exit. Guess what? There is no too wide on exit. You're in the barrier. To drive faster than anyone else around Monaco requires skill. Because let's say it's a left-hand fourth gear corner at 150 miles an hour. You want to try and take that at 155, 156. You can't run wide. So the skill is about keeping it within the lines. The skill is about not putting it in the barrier. So my argument about track limits is you can keep your foot pinned flat. Like turn 19 at
Turn
COTA.
19 COTA. Yep.
Okay. So when IndyCar went there, and I've spoken to, IndyCar drivers about it, and they were well aware. It looked farcical. It looked utterly farcical. And they were like, yeah, but there's the asphalt there, so we'll use it. Fine. But don't tell me that takes skill. Because it doesn't. It takes more skill to take a corner. So the max you can take that corner and stay within the lines. Let's use the example. It's 150 fourth gear. Mm-hmm. It takes no skill to run through that corner at 160, foot pinned to the ground, if you're running around the exit on the exit asphalt.
But it's just a different.
That's not skill.
It's just a different corner. It's just a different profile of a corner because they added the asphalt there for it to be used.
But the corner is the corner. The corner is the
Well,
corner, as clearly
defined
defined
by white line to white
by
line.
the white lines. Then you're just driving whatever circuit you want. And
But
surely
that
motor
to
racing
me-
isn't about driving the circuit you want. It's about driving the circuit that exists in the fastest way. Otherwise, and I've used this argument with you before, listen,
Yep.
the Indy GP circuit, you might as well just drive the oval. Why? Because the asphalt's there, right? So if it's just about driving where the hell you want because it's the fastest route around, just drive
Yep.
the bloody oval.
It's a good point.
And you
well,
can, and
it does
so
bring up.
but the other thing, and listen,
Yep,
we
go ahead.
can argue till the cows come home
Go ahead.
about whether it's about skill or whether it's about, pushing the limits and all of that. There is a massive safety implication with all of this because the reason the runoff is as wide as it is and that the barriers are positioned where they are and at the angle they are is because if that corner, if the maximum perceived limitation around that corner is fourth gear 150, but actually you're going to drive through that at 160, 165 and use the runoff, and something happens to you while you're on that runoff and you're running 15, 20 miles an hour faster than you're supposed to, and you're running 50 meters closer to that barrier than you're supposed to, and you're coming at it from a completely different angle because you're driving where you want rather than where the circuit is designed to go, and something goes wrong, you're hitting that barrier quicker, faster, and at a different angle than it's supposed to be hit. And that's a scenario that nobody wants to envisage.
And I can appreciate that.
And that's why they're really key on it, is because it's not just about skill set. It's not just about, being good to the regulations. There is a massive safety consideration with it.
Now, I hear what you're saying. Can you help me out with something? Because I have not heard many drivers support track limits. I have not heard many drivers say, thank you. Thanks for doing this. Thanks for leaving us within the lines as a way we get around this racetrack.
It's because you're all competitive beings and because you want to drive around as fast as you possibly can. I mean,
so do we not have
how many footballers say thank you for VAR?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But listen, and I still roll it back to the same arguments that sit at the heart of this. Soccer, NFL, NBA, doesn't matter what it is, right? You go outside of the court, ball goes outside of the court, your foot goes outside the court, it's out. It's out. Play stops.
I get
tennis,
you, but to your point,
you have your lines which are in and are out. There is a playable surface, and once you go outside of that playable surface, you're no longer playing to the same rules as the other person. So you either have one set of regulations for everybody, or if you say just go wherever the hell you want, then you have no regulations and you just have chaos.
Fine, but for the better part of 120 years before we paved all this runoff, as you put it, it was self-policing. There was no need. So I think where we are for football, for soccer, for tennis, those sports were designed from day one with those parameters. This sport, after 120 years, is suddenly having to enter an era of parameters of which we have not had in the past. They didn't exist. It wasn't an official calling the idea that you put two tires in the grass. Sorry, that's not a real lap. That just didn't happen. So I think this is the problem I'm having with it. And I think for race car drivers, if there's a driver right now who's 5 years old in karts or 7 years old, and this is all he or she knows, then this will mean nothing in 20 years because this will be everything they've known. But for myself, for Lewis Hamilton, for even Max Verstappen, we did not grow up with this. This was not the sport we entered, being told to be within certain lines. And now suddenly at COTA in turn 19, because it's paved on the exit, and by the way, we don't even run out there in NASCAR too much, even though we're allowed to, because it's so bumpy, you basically would wreck. I don't even know many F1 cars could run out there. The point being, he went a fraction, maybe centimeters, with his left sides over a white line at 156 miles an hour. It's 3.8 Gs inside an F1 car, extracting every bit of performance as the amazing, talented individual he is, and was told by someone sitting in a room looking at a bunch of screens, you went out of track. Sorry, that's not a real lap.
You were an inch over.
Yes,
and listen,
I have a problem with that.
I hear you, and I get it. And I think the issue that you have is when the exit curbs are wider than the cars themselves, or they're not so bumpy, they're literally just painted on the asphalt,
Yep.
that you can run over it, well, then there's no deterrence. So I'll give you a great example: Parabolica at Monza, one of the most brilliant, fearsome corners in Formula One, because you get that hooked up, that lap is pinned, right? You do a move around the outside at Parabolica, you're a god.
You're a hero.
But in the old days, you're hurtling through, right-hander, it's pulling you to the left all the way through. You keep your foot flat, 2 wheels over, you're in the gravel. You're in the gravel, you're in the tire wall. Like, there's no two ways about it, because you're hurtling through there 150, 160, 170. It's a hell of a corner. Now, a couple of years ago, got rid of the gravel, put asphalt in. Drivers hated it. They absolutely hated it, because they were like, where's the challenge? I know I can just put it in. I can run wide. I can run over. I can put pretty much my entire car over. And they were getting pinged for track limits at Parabolica. It's madness. It's madness.
There's such thing, yeah. Track limits, you were going to be in the barrier.
Exactly. So they've put the gravel back in. Because they listened and they were like, okay, so the drivers actually you need to have the Monaco wall that says, don't go beyond this. Like, literally, you can skirt the edge, but don't go beyond it. And I think that's what we have to try to get back to. What I'd hope to see us get back to is a scenario where the curbs do their jobs in terms of allowing the driver to take the optimum fastest line through a corner and just skirt over it on the exit, on the apex, whatever. But that maybe on the other side there is perhaps a removable strip that would be asphalt for bikes, for open wheel or for tin tops or stock cars, whatever we're talking about. It would be a strip of AstroTurf, loose gravel, whatever it might be. Something that, remember years ago, Anthony Davidson, I think, said, a pool with sharks in it. Whatever it is that is just over the curb.
With laser beams on their heads.
Bingo. That acts as that natural deterrence, because you put you go over that curb and you put 2 wheels in the gravel, your lap's toast, you're done. And that's all it needs. That's all it needs to be. You can still have the 3 miles of asphalt on the other side of it that will be there to save you, to allow you to slow the car, whatever it needs be, and reduce the ferocity of an impact with the barrier if that's where your car is heading. Great. But I do agree that I think the way we approach curbing, it needs a global, singular sort of effort to make it absolutely uniform across championships, across circuits, globally. Because otherwise you turn up at a different circuit on a different weekend, you have different curbs, different ferocities, different mindsets that have gone into the creation of them. Are they there as deterrents? Are they there to appease? I think we need to get to, as you said, it is an issue that will affect every championship. So I think you need to have a discussion and hopefully create a direction that means that all circuits come to the same conclusion as to what they want to pull out of it.
It is a great point, and that's what I want to do moving forward. And I think I'm in full agreement with you and Anthony Davidson. And I've even I've had the joke of daggers on the wall, whatever. Us drivers, we're not sane. Remember, we are the ones that are taking these cars and deciding that going through corners at 150 miles an hour makes a lot of sense, while there's a ton of dangers on the other side, and all we want to do is beat each other, right?
It's the Chastain argument, right?
Yes.
You can leave the thing wide open and put it in the wall and pass 10 cars on the final corner, right?
Yep.
Does it show any skill? Is it safe? Is it silly? And that wasn't cool. Doesn't matter how you. Okay, in the first instance, you're like,
it was pretty cool.
It was pretty cool.
Was like,
but then you really think about it, and you're like, this sets a dangerous precedent. It's a really it's such a tricky debate. But there, you have your limitations, you have your self-policing, but you can still, if you abuse what is there, and that was abuse. the fact the wall was there, that was abusing the fact the wall was there. Just as using the runoff to get a quicker lap time is abusing what is there.
So, and I think you've brought up a great point, which is this global fix, this global standard, maybe, right? Because I think that is a problem. It is a problem to me that in Formula One, they're within the white lines. In NASCAR, we're using every bit of runoff possible. Yes, it's different flavors for different people, and I like that each sport, the cool thing about motorsports is unlike, football, it's different. Depending, you have different flavors of it, right? You have Formula One, you have NASCAR, you have different offerings, different types of racing, whatever. That's great. And I love it. Sports car racing, endurance, there's so much of it. But this track issue is actually a global issue. And so how we come together to fix this, or to say, hey guys, these are the rules, these make sense. And I think one thing we've sort of dabbled on, but I do believe we need to figure out, which is us drivers, we want the deterrent. We want the natural barrier to stop us from doing it. You've brought up some good ideas. I think all motorsports could come together to figure it out, what we could do together. But where what I've heard, and I've had some conversations with people within Formula One right now, is that the current situation, though, is not liked by drivers. Like, this is not what we want to be a part of. So, and we know we want deterrence, but right now you're holding us in this box. Where do the drivers come in? Where's our opinion? Where does it matter or not matter? Where do you listen to us and not listen to us? That's my question to you from your point of view and what you're experiencing in the paddock right now.
It's a funny one, isn't it? Because the drivers say, we hate getting pinged for track limits. And so as, those of us sitting outside the cars, we go, well, just don't drive outside track limits. Do the job that you're handsomely paid for and keep it on the track. Don't want to get pinged? Don't drive off the track. Really easy. There's a circuit, stick to it. But of course, we know that, give an inch, take a mile. And that's the racing driver's philosophy, mindset. Listen, I've seen lots of people suggesting lots of different approaches that you could take. I know Lucas Degrassi has always been a driver who's been in favor of using sensors on the cars, midpoint sensor, so that if the midpoint of the car goes beyond a certain point off track, it's automatically pinged. Because at the moment, it's similar to how a lot of calls are made in other sports. It's an individual keeping an eye on one particular corner, and as we found out after COTA, everyone's looking at turn 19 or turn 12. No one was looking at turn 6. And a bunch of drivers were cutting the inside apex at 6. So, you've either got to do this by AI and computer learning and make sure that you have an overhead camera at every single apex and every single exit, and a car is, a millimeter off and they're pinged, which no one's going to like. Because as soon as you take it down to that, you have a VAR situation that we have in soccer at the moment, which is universally derided and hated. And nobody wants that. Nobody wants that in motorsport. And also because you take, as you say, that those Mika moments, or, Zanardi's pass at the corkscrew, right? To every metric illegal. And yet one of the greatest passes in IndyCar history, right? But to every metric, completely illegal. So where do you draw the, particularly as circuits are, you're losing that deterrent. You're losing that if a driver does put two wheels in the gravel and the dirt and the grass and it kicks it up everywhere, and they go off the white line, or they make a pass and they get pushed off track and they're all four wheels on the grass, sideways, all over the place, and they somehow get back on the track and make the move past. Is that not thrilling? Is that not what we want to see? Well, we don't want to see drivers getting pushed off, but if they hold it, and despite that natural deterrent, they still pull off the move, and then you get the ping, leaving the track and gaining an advantage. Oh, it would rip your heart out of your chest, wouldn't it? So
it would infuriate me.
Yeah, and look, it would us as well, because you're not leaving the track then at a place where you would naturally gain an advantage. If you can ride the deterrent and still gain the advantage, chapeau, But then we say that, and then we still have the safety argument. So it is such a complex issue, that, as I think you agree, requires, you know, I think leaders from all major championships and circuit owners and promoters, the FIA, everybody, to sit down in a room and say, look, from the perspective of safety and circuit design, this has happened. It is frankly an immovable change that the course has been set for the future. How do we ensure that the thrill of seeing a driver push to the limit and sometimes wobble right on that edge to the point that if the back just scoots out a little bit and they correct and bring it back, oh, sorry, that's all 4 off. How do you keep that without, because you need rules and it has to be black and white and it has to be the same for everybody. For my money, the greatest skill is seeing drivers stick to within those limits. And if a racing driver can find 1 mile an hour, 2 miles an hour, 3 miles an hour more than anyone else through that same corner, taking a slightly different line and just sucking it all, some of the greatest laps you'll ever see. Lewis Hamilton at Singapore, when he gets out of the car and he's shaking because he has gone to the limit and on a couple of corners a little bit over and somehow brought it home. That's what you want to see. But how do you get that on circuits that aren't lined with walls?
And it's great.
And you
want
to see that everywhere.
Point. Well, you just, Max Verstappen, what was it? Was it Jeddah touching the wall on the lap?
Final corner. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
And you're like,
see, that's the moments we need. Those are the moments you just put together so well, so eloquently as you do. Great use of the English language, by the way. But the idea of these moments, these pushing it that 101%, the 100.5% and getting away with it. That's what we want. That's what we need.
Absolutely.
I think
you don't want them to be killjoys.
No.
And that's the thing. But I think they're only seen as being killjoys because they're trying so desperately to apply the because we did go through a few years where the rules weren't necessarily applied as routinely as they could be race to race. And I think they just want to get to a place where the rules are, hey little one, where the rules are applied as we've done well. We're
I want to just give you credit that you are constantly working with Isla here, being able to put these words in this argument together while bouncing up and down with Isla on his chest. For those listening at home,
I haven't seen her for 2 weeks.
I'm sorry to break this time up, but
you're not at all. She's been fast asleep.
Yeah, I mean, this has been scintillating conversation for her. So I think, you know what, on track limits, I appreciate you coming on here and giving this point of view. I believe to summarize it, we are where we could agree is that there's something needs to happen to allow us to see that, to have those moments that don't just involve walls, and whatever that is, whether it's a natural deterrent that these tracks can put on there or a change in how it's officiated to be a little bit more black and white, and maybe there's room for leeway in certain corners, whatever that tolerance is, we can both agree that's probably the best way forward. I'm just going to tell you one other thing. Turn 6 at Coda. So in NASCAR, we run up on that curb as well, like Perez was doing. Technically, it should have been against the rules as well, but every car was doing it. And the NASCAR never said a word because we have cutting rules. We just don't have rules on the X of the corner, basically. You just can't make the track shorter. But that spot where he was going, in that red area, there's a ton of grip. That paint is super grippy. So what he was able to do and running in there, that was worth a lot. So it was funny to see people catch that.
You guys will not drive a part of the track that isn't faster to drive on. If it's slower to drive on it, you won't take it.
Well, then you're not a very good driver.
There is my argument against exceeding track limits, because if you can't stick to it, if you're going to take the path of least resistance, it's about, if you want to take that corner at 160, but the car won't allow it or your skill won't allow it, running onto the apron doesn't make it a corner well driven.
No, definitely. If you would just indulge us for a minute, we have now that we have you here talking Formula One, we'd love to dive in some topics we feel like our audience would love here at the Money Lab, and obviously primarily a US based audience. So, we are eagerly been watching Logan Sargeant this year in F1 as an American driver. There was around Zandvoort time a little bit of I guess, pressure being put on him in terms of his performances, compared to his teammate Alex Albon. Where do you assess Logan this year in terms of jumping up to Formula One? Not a ton of F2 experience, obviously with a lot of tailwinds in terms of being an American and the popularity of F1 in America. What, from your point of view, being so intimately close to it, how have you assessed his performances this year?
So again, I'm going to preface this by saying I like Logan a lot. He's a great guy, and a top lad. Great to hang out with and super cool. Listen, I think he was very good in Formula 3. I think he was competent in Formula 2. I'm not convinced that he's got it to stay long term in Formula 1. Maybe to have a second chance, to see how a year in the sport may have allowed him to progress and develop into a second season. But is he in it for the long term? From what I've seen this year, I'm really sad to say I doubt it. And there's no shame in that. There's absolutely no shame in not quite being at F1 level. We saw the same with Mick Schumacher. Somebody who was actually exceptional in junior categories and got to Formula 1. It just wasn't quite. It's never quite been there. Never quite clicked. And we see it with drivers who in the junior formulas can be so talented, and you get to Formula 1 and they're just a half beat behind chasing the car. That feeling where you're not the one driving it. It's kind of driving you. And listen, I think Logan's great, and you don't get to Formula 1 unless you're quality. And he is quality, but I just.
What would he have to do in year 2 to change your opinion on that?
Oh my God! I mean, the first thing is you've got to start getting close to Alex, which is no mean feat because Alex is supremely talented, and Red Bull have admitted if they had their time again, they probably wouldn't be quite so quick to drop him. But I mean, look, for me, he peaked in Saudi, and I think since then he's been chasing his tail because he'll have those weekends where he's fast, but then he kind of gets in his own head and pulls it back rather than overstep. And if you're constantly he's in his own head too much, and he's thinking too much about, I don't want to screw this up. And so your reactions go down and your lap time increases because you think it's like Checo. Checo's thinking too much.
Oh yeah.
He can't drive naturally.
It's a mental game.
Yeah, totally.
Yep. The pressure, and for Checo, I mean, it's 100%. And I always tell people, for race car drivers, there's two currencies. Obviously, money, takes money to do this, and the other one is confidence. And confidence it's the split second difference. It's the difference between a Max Verstappen and a Checo right now.
Confidence brings results. Results bring confidence, which bring results, which bring confidence, which bring results. Speaking
of one driver whose confidence has to be on the up and up, Daniel Riccardo. Man, this is from my outside point of view, if he is able to get back to a premier ride, this might be one of the greatest comebacks in Formula One history in some respects.
Yeah,
I know a lot of people think he's there for his personality, but if you can put that on track, performances on track as well, this is unheard of.
If he can get back to the Daniel of old, it's one of the great stories because it's not just an injury. It's a complete unraveling of who he was as a driver, who he was as a person. He admitted he had to go away, take himself away, reconnect with who he was, rediscover his love for racing. And okay, look, one swallow does not a summer make, but that Mexican Grand Prix weekend, start to finish, was like, my God, this is original spec Daniel. And I think Red Bull, ever since Daniel left, have been searching for a Daniel replacement, and they may just finally have come to the realization that the only driver they can replace Daniel with is Daniel.
And I don't want to take too much time now. I would love to dive it. Speaking of lack of confidence, his time at McLaren really seemed to be that problem, right?
It's so similar to where Checo's at now. Car goes away from him. He's driving at the front of his head rather than letting it all happen. Takes himself apart, has to, try and re-figure out how to drive.
Yep.
Because he can't drive the car. And when that happens to you, the joy goes out of it, the natural, not effortless, but you know what I mean when I say effortless, that you have to be in the zone. You have to be able to be driving on instinct and not in the conscious part of your brain. It's in the unconscious. It's, you get in the zone and everything is natural and it just comes to you. Whereas for we mere mortals jump into a racing car and we're all arms and elbows because it's terrifying because we're not used to it. So, and Daniel and Checo, I think, got into that place where they were so in the front of their head and they're thinking about it, every single thing they're doing in the car so much that it becomes unnatural. And when it's unnatural, it's slow. And I think it's a very similar scenario for both of them.
Who's the best driver right now that no one's paying attention to? Who's putting in the best performances, in your opinion, that you've seen over right now that says that people are not giving the credit?
That people aren't giving the credit to?
Yeah.
Maybe Lewis, because they just expect it from him.
It's true. Hey, it's a good one.
Max, because they expect it from him. Everyone just goes, "Oh, it's the car." If it was the car, Checo wouldn't be where Checo is. Checo's a perfectly good driver. You look at Max and you think, this is Michael Schumacher levels of team and driver in perfect synergy. It's Jim Clark and Lotus. It's the rare moments of car and driver together. But what Max is doing out on track is, and it's something that Lewis used to do, when he had no real rivals on track, he'd set himself up as his own rival and want to better himself. It's the fact that Max can go out first lap, fresh set of tyres, hasn't been out on track yet, goes out, first lap's like a second and a half quicker than anyone else will do, and no one touches him for the rest of the weekend. Like he's unreal, and no one's talking about him or giving him props because everyone's like, it's the car, it's boring. It's not. These are rarefied days, and we only think about it 10, 15 years in the future. We look back now at Michael and what he did with Ferrari. And at the time, I remember he won the championship in 2002, my first year as an F1 journalist. He won it in June. What the hell did we have to talk about for 02 would have been
5?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah.
Yeah. I have a painting of that moment.
What are we going to talk about for the rest of the year? But you look back on it now and think that level of brilliance. We talk about it in sanctified terms
folklore.
Now. Yeah, completely. But you never appreciated it at the time. And it was the same with Lewis. We look back now and we're going to say he was good, wasn't he? Rather than he's great, isn't he? I'd rather talk about it in the current tense. Other than that, look, I mean, everyone's talking about Piastri, who's just having a stellar rookie season. Lando's doing a brilliant job as well. I think Lando is sensational. It's actually probably the people that we don't talk about are the ones that we just expect it from, and we don't give them the props that we should for the absolute quality that they bring.
So let's go more global now, just to take a little bit more time here. And what's the thing? Is it Max and Red Bull's domination, or is there something else out there that with F1's popularity explosion as of late that could hurt its ability to keep this popularity? Is what in your eyes right now is the thing that you're saying, yeah, we got to figure that out, or we have to be careful?
I think stability and regulation is always a very good thing. I think the longer you can keep one set of regulations in place. Oh, shush, darling. That's a controversial opinion.
She agrees.
What do you think it is, darling? Or are you saying don't say too much, Daddy? You'll get yourself in trouble. Stability and regulations is always a positive thing because you hit that kind of ceiling and everyone then has to catch up and the field gets closer and closer together. But what's amazing when you look at this is you think, my goodness, we're in just the second year of these regulations and the field is so close. Red Bull have just done a mighty job. If you take, it's not even taking Red Bull out of the scenario, but you take Max out of the scenario, you've got, 7 different race winners this year? 8 different race winners?
It'd be amazing.
One of the greatest seasons of all time. And it's just Max and that RB19 together create something unbeatable. But when you take that out of the equation, one weekend it would have been an Aston Martin winning, then you get a Ferrari winning, then a Mercedes, then an Alpine will be up there, then back to Aston, then And with any normal human being in that Red Bull, then the Red Bull's winning one weekend. It would have been one of the most astonishing seasons. I actually think we're in a really good place with the new financial regulations and how that allows a team like Aston in 7th place last year to use the money, use the time, use the knowledge, boom, 2nd quickest at the start of the year. Or a McLaren who started this season 9th fastest, use their brains, use the money wisely, use the development time well, pop, 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 now they're 2nd fastest. And all the time, those big teams, your Ferraris, your Mercedes, not so much your Red Bulls, who are still doing a great job, but they were used to throwing money at the problem, throwing development time, throwing wind tunnel time at it, spend as much as you want, unlimited. They can't do that anymore. And it's taken Mercedes 2 years to figure out that they've taken the wrong path.
This has been, I agree that the financial regulations is one of the greatest things that Formula One has ever done, and all motorsports should be taking notes. I've been imploring NASCAR to follow the same route. So it's definitely just something that has created a whole new set of storylines, but also ability to have that parity that we all want, which is awesome.
And I think we'll only really see the full benefit of that and the full realization of where it can get to further down the line. We're still only 2 years into these regulations and into making them work. Listen, let's see where we are 5 years down the line. Yeah, we've got new regs coming in 2026. The apparently will make the cars smaller, lighter, maybe not back to where they were in the 90s, but certainly a little more compact than where they are right now. So again, let's see where we are in 5-6 years time when everyone's running to the same budget. Time's already tight. And, if in 5-6 years time we've got a scenario where, dream scenario would be like in IndyCar where turn up on any weekend and anyone can win.
Yeah.
Will that ever happen? I don't know. I'd love for it to be so, but I think the foundations have been set for a really, really positive future, I think.
The one thing I will say about that is that we have learned maybe in IndyCar and even NASCAR with the specization of the series, which is a word I just made up now.
I like it. Keep it.
Well,
it's good.
The problem is you do end up wherever they all run the same speed, and that becomes a little bit of a problem. There has to be a little bit of variability. But anyway,
and there always will be in Formula One because it will always be each team designing and building their own cars. That will never change.
Yep. That's awesome. Well, I think Isla is saying this. Right. This is the end.
Isla's saying she's waking up and it's time for food.
It's time to go. Will, this has been awesome. Thank you so much, man.
My pleasure.
On here. We're gonna have you back because I think we could chat for hours.
I would love that. I'd really.
We'd love
that.
to see it one of these days at a NASCAR race one of these times. So
honestly,
if you ever find time.
I just need to find a spare weekend, and I'm right there.
Maybe we'll be a combo one day. You never know.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Anyway, thank you so much for coming on, bud. I appreciate it.
Pleasure, mate. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to The Money Lap. As always, check out themoneylap.com for the best 5 minutes in motorsports, or sometimes just the coolest stuff in motorsports, delivered directly to your inbox 3 times a week. Check us out on YouTube. We're growing fast over there. And of course, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. We're all over the internet. We're spreading the word of how cool motorsports is. Check us out.